Welcome back to Eschatology Matters. I'm Josh Howard, and I want to remind you, if you have not already, follow Eschatology Matters. Go ahead and like and subscribe to our page, and that way you can see the content as it continues to come out. You can follow Eschatology Matters on YouTube, which is our traditional format, or you can find us on any podcasting platform you might use. I would also encourage you, please check out the website, eschatologymatters.org. You can follow not only our content there, but you can also keep up with the daily devotionals, or the not quite so daily devotionals, weekly devotionals, let's say, that are coming out there. There's written content there as well as audio and video content, but you can also keep up with the events that we have coming out through Eschatology Matters. One of those events is our annual conference. This year it's going to be September 8th and 9th, and that'll be in Topeka, Indiana. Our theme for this conference is How Then Shall We Live, which is looking to the experienced or lived out implications of our eschatology. What does eschatology drive us to do? How does it cause us to live? How does this impact the daily life of believers? There's several great topics we're going to be covering, several great speakers, so please check that out and get your tickets soon for that. But today we're doing one of our community spotlights, and today I'm joined by Doug Barger of Particular Baptist Heritage Books. So, Doug, thank you so much for joining me today and chatting a little bit.
Yeah, it's good to be here, Josh.
Absolutely. So, been looking forward to this for some time. We had to actually reschedule twice due to some illness on my end of things. So I appreciate that on the front end, Doug. But Doug, can you just give us a little bit of bio on yourself, a little bit of introduction, where you come from, maybe some of your background in ministry and that sort of thing?
Yeah. So first of all, let me just say it's good to be here with you today to talk about the Particular Baptist Heritage Book Ministry. Just a quick plug, our website is particularbaptistbooks.com. So if folks want to learn more about us, they could go there. Just a little bit about myself, quick bio. I was born and raised in Indiana. I grew up in downtown Indianapolis, near the inner east side of Indianapolis. Was born into a non-Christian home. And then in a series of providential circumstances, I found myself married in 2001 to a woman, my dear wife, Jessica, whose brother-in-law was a Baptist minister. And so I found myself visiting the Bible Study Chapel. That's my home church. And in 2001, at the age of 25, I was called to the gospel of Jesus Christ and was converted. And so, that was a long journey and struggle before I even got up to that point during my college and, educational years. I really kind of read a lot, was interested in a lot in world religions, even though I come from a non-religious background. During my time at Ivy Tech, I earned an applied science degree there in design technologies, and then I would go on and get my bachelor's in marketing, and then a couple years after graduation, I would go back and get a diploma in business administration from Ivy Tech. Those are, probably community colleges here in Indiana. So that kind of got me off into my professional life, and then shortly after that, in 2001, I was converted. And then in 2004, I felt a call into ministry there at my church. 2006, I was ordained in the ministry. Shortly after being ordained, I kind of did it backwards. This was happening later on in my life. So I'm close to 28, 30 years old at this time. I was already working in my career, and then I began to take online courses through London Reformed Baptist Seminary. And then other, institutions, founders, they offer a lot of online courses.
Oh, yeah.
The Institute of Reformed Baptist Studies. A lot of people may not know this. There's huge resources online to educate yourself. Reformed Baptist Seminary, they have a whole host of free online classes. Good, just covenantal, confessional Reformed Baptist seminaries out there. They got a lot of free resources for people wanting to, further deepen their education. So I was a member there at Bible Study Chapel in Indianapolis for 14 years. And then in 2015, we were sent out to plant, where I now pastor in Newcastle, Indiana, Christ Reformed Baptist Church. We are going on our 8th year this December. And along the way, we started the Particular Baptist Heritage Books, which we're here to talk about today. So I'm married, been married a little over 20 years now, and I have 3 children and I have 1 grandchild. And so that's just a short bio of where I come from and where I'm at now.
Awesome. And praise God for the grandchild. That's awesome to hear. I would not have pegged you for a grandchild already, but that's awesome. You look too young for a grandchild, my friend. But no, thinking toward your kind of your recap of your ministry, that you got a lot of similarities in there with my sort of testimony. So I'm thankful for that. I was kind of I was around 30 when I felt God leading us into ministry, leading me into ministry. So that's awesome to hear. Give us some definitions, Doug, straight off the front end. And I want to come back to you, by the way. You mentioned a couple of solid ministries, founders ministries. We're grateful for those men, IRBS and some of those others. So remind me toward the end of this to recap those. But you said you started Particular Baptist Heritage Books. And I want to walk into maybe number one, kind of walk us through, and this is going to sound nonsensical, but I think it's good to like define terms. What is a Baptist essentially? What sets Baptists apart as a group? And then secondly, what is a particular Baptist? Because that was a term I know for me, I wasn't aware of what a particular Baptist was until seminary. So could you walk us into some of those terms and why you guys chose Particular Baptist Heritage Books?
Yeah, well, to answer the first part of your question, Josh, Baptist would be distinct from what we would say Paedo-Baptist, which is Latin for infant baptizers. Credo Baptist, believers Baptist, emerging, I believe, out of the 17th century, are those who would only baptize professing disciples into the visible church. They flow out of the English Puritan stream of separatists. And there were different strands of these Baptists, which leads us into the second part of the question. There were the general Baptists. Their understanding of soteriology, or the doctrines of salvation, was that Christ generally or universally shed his blood on the cross for all people in the entire world. So they would lean more in what is known as Arminianism. It is up to the individual themselves to apply the gift of Christ's salvation at the cross to themselves, independent, or in some schemes of Arminianism, by a certain amount of grace. But, as well as I do, that scheme of the understanding of soteriology, or that understanding of salvation, it includes man plus God equaling salvation. And then there were, who we're here to talk about today, the Calvinistic, or what were identified as the Particular Baptists. And they were given that, they didn't initially identify themselves that way. You go to the original 7 churches in London that wrote the first London Confession of Faith. That was a very Calvinistic, reformed document. And they just called themselves the baptized churches. But to help distinguish themselves from the general Baptists later on, they began to be identified as the particular, because of the doctrine of particular atonement, that Christ shed his blood on the cross only for his elect, only for his church, the whosoever's his spirit would call unto him to receive it. And he did not shed his blood for anyone other than that. So they held to a robust defense of the doctrine of particular atonement, and they became known as Particular or Calvinistic Baptists.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm trying to remember the old seminary joke. It was something about the general Baptists believe everything in general, but nothing in particular. Something along those lines.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll just please don't send us hate mail over that joke. But yeah.
Yeah, the general Baptists, I mean, they had their own confessions of faith, and some of them were honestly very good on the fundamentals of the faith. But they were written, of course, from an Arminian perspective. And so, they took their doctrine seriously.
Yeah.
And, I don't know how, I don't run into that many today who would identify themselves as general or free will Baptists. You do run into some. I mean, we have a church in Newcastle. They know what it means. They know their history.
Right.
And, they would articulate it that way. Yeah.
Right.
It's kind of ironic. You got within the city limits of Newcastle, Indiana, where we're at, you have on their sign a Free Will Baptist Church, and then our church a Reformed Baptist Church. So
yeah,
that's the perfect example of a general Baptist and Particular Baptist Church right there.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah. So tell me this. So with your church, and I'm only asking about this because number one, is Particular Baptist Heritage Books, then is that is that a ministry of your local church, or is it just loosely connected? Like, what's the connection there? And then in that vein, is your church there a 1689 church, or do you guys hold to one of the confessions, or where do you guys kind of situate yourselves?
Yeah, sure. So the second question first, the second part first. We are a fully subscription church to the 1689. And the ministry, the first part of your question, the ministry is connected to our church. We have a young man in our church who serves as our copy editor, AJ, volunteers from our church. They're always coming into the bindery and helping out. So the book ministry is a vital part, and vision of our church. It's in our corporate prayer gatherings. For instance, we've been praying for the translation of a book called The Fundamentals of the 1689 to be translated in the Burmese language.
Oh, wow.
And so that came about. I told a brother in our church this week that his prayers are answered because the 70-year-old man who was working on the translation work, who lives in Georgia here in the United States, he's a native Burmese speaking man. He's not up to date on the IT language. And so we've been praying at church, Lord, bring him someone, because we don't have the resources or the time to coach him through that. And lo and behold, this week I was emailed all the files in the proper format and all that stuff. So
Wow.
so PBHB, yeah, we do. It's a central part in our church. We believe in the vision of its importance. We always say we're preserving much more than memories. These old historic works that are out of print, they're more than memories. They're equipping our future. They're preserving our future, our theological heritage that we believe are important biblical truths. And so, yeah, there's a lot of people in our church life, body life, that are involved in the ministry.
Yeah, let's press in on that one, Doug, because that was going to be my next question. Was essentially number one, like, what do you guys? I feel like all these questions are two-parters. I apologize, brother, but no. What are you guys up to exactly with Particular Heritage Books? Like, what is the impetus there? The vision of that ministry. But I guess coinciding with that, the second part would be just like why, like what's the need for this? Where do you guys see that need for a ministry like this? So like the vision and the need. What are you guys looking at there?
Yeah, yeah. To take a step back, I want to say something as a pastor. Um, you know, we're at a place, and I'm speaking, of course, very directly to Baptists who have for a long time, as I wrote in my introduction to the Pillars of Truth, we have lost our confessional heritage.
Mm.
And so, as we're being introduced to it again, as informed laymen in the church and as even pastors, we have to be diligent in trying to excite our people to appreciate and also understand the emphasis that we're seeing ought to be placed on the confessions. Like we got to be diligent and not letting it be just the pastor's hobby horse,
Right.
right? That he, no, this needs to be a body of divinity that's important to us all for the preservation and the fidelity, the doctrinal fidelity of our churches moving forward. And so, it's so exciting to hear how a lot of Baptist churches now are using the catechism, using the confession in their liturgical body life, in their worship service. They're using it in their family worship. These are great things to hear. And so when I had the vision to start PBHB, which really came, I'm getting into your question now, which really came out of necessity. As I was taking classes at London Reformed Baptist Seminary, I really come to a crossroads in studying covenant theology of whether or not I could possibly be wrong about baptism.
Mm.
The Bible study chapel where I come from, they were Calvinistic, but they were dispensational. It was a very well-balanced dispensationalism. You always understood, even though there may have been some contradictions, you always understood somehow or another that Abraham and you, as a new covenant Christian, were going to be together at the great feast of the Lamb. Now that doesn't fit nicely with a lot of dispensational preaching, but that was Pastor Morton, and he would preach the Bible, but he did understand that there was some sort of covenantal, and some within the Reformed community still believe this, that there's still some sort of unfulfilled covenant obligations on God's part to the Jews. So anyhow, when I come to the more Reformed understanding of covenants, I come to a crossroads and I said, you know what, if I have been wrong about the hermeneutical lens that I use to interpret redemptive history, perhaps I'm wrong about the issue of baptism as well. So I did a deep dive into that study of how the covenants connect with baptism, so forth and so on. And along the way, I come across the writings of Pascal Denot, Dr. James Renahan, and then the 17th century Particular Baptist Nehemiah Cox, who Richard Barcellos and his publishing ministry published. And as you're going through those men's work, they're citing original sources from the 17th century Baptists who are given a covenantal defense of why they are credo Baptists. And I had never heard this before. So like any good student or researcher, what do? We get on Google and we start trying to find these original sources, right? And lo and behold, you can't find them. And I always ask myself, my bookshelf has a whole host of books printed in new typeset of all the Reformed Paedo-Baptist guys and their articulation of why they practice what they practice from a covenantal hermeneutic. But where are the forgotten Puritans? That's what I like to call the Particular Baptists from the 17th century. They're the forgotten Puritans. Where are they at? And so that's kind of what started, my quest to get, what I would see as my forefathers back into the hands of the next generation at our churches. And that's been an 8-9 year work in progress. It's been a long time. I started off printing color pamphlets called the Baptist Witness and stapling them and mailing them to 900 Baptist churches throughout the state of Indiana.
Oh, wow.
Because when I first come into these truths about, covenantalism and then covenantalism through the Baptist understanding, I thought, the Baptists just don't know this, so they need to be informed. And so I'm mailing out, 900 booklets, and my kids are putting labels on the envelopes and stuff. And this is like 6 years ago. And I kind of quickly found out that some people are decidedly not covenantal as Baptists. They are decidedly not that. But nonetheless, I'm just kind of saying this to give you a snapshot of how the vision kind of evolved. So it kind of goes from that, and then we're doing paperback books of things that we could find online. And then we begin to make some connections with other men who share the same vision that, our forefathers do need to be put back in print in a high quality format. So we begin to get resources on, some online databases that were more of the 17th century works. So we're able to, get them transcribed, and we work with transcribers, typesetters around the world, from the Philippines, from Turkey, and they're doing some of the typesetting for us. We work with them online, and then we go from paperbacks to finally where we're at now, which was March 2022. We did our first hard-cased books, and I didn't mention in my bio, but I'm bivocational. I work in the commercial construction industry. I got a lot of irons in the fire. So I'm part owner of a company. We have 45 employees. It's nonstop here in Indiana with construction. I only say all that to say, to make books, you have to do a lot of research and a lot of homework. And so, over the last 6-7 years, I just kept doing research, making connections, figuring out how to make them. And so 2022, we made our first book. It was a nice edition of the Baptist Catechism embedded with the scripture proofs. It never been done before. And we wanted to publish our confession, our catechetical standards first, just so we can let everyone, in the church community know kind of where we're coming from doctrinally. Yeah. So that's kind of the vision in a nutshell, to get our forefathers back into print. It takes a lot of time. Copy editing takes a lot of time, pre-press work. Making the book actually is the easy part. Most of the labor, most of the time is on the pre-editing and pre-press side of things. Okay. And so that's what we're doing. Just a broader scope of the vision of Particular Baptist Books. Right now, our church, we have a mission with a church in India where we do pastor classes through the 1689. We have a pastors conference coming up there, Sukumar Bandapali. He is a brother over there at Central Baptist Church. Me and his church and our church, we formed together to have a Bible Institute, and we're teaching it specifically from the Reformed Baptist perspective in the confession of faith. We have a pastors conference coming up in August, the 11th and 12th. I'll be preaching 3 messages, and Pastor Will Glover from a church in Southern Indiana will be preaching 3 messages. And we're right now in the process. I just had a meeting with Pastor Sukumar this week of taking a systematic theology. Your listeners and viewers may find this absolutely astonishing, but in the 21st century, I see all those books behind you on your shelf. You look at all these books behind me on my shelf. We have in the West deep, deep wells of a theological heritage. PBHB is a small piece of trying to retrieve some of that. But even without PBHB, we still have from our English heritage, English Puritan heritage, we have wells and wells of preserved theological riches at our disposal in the English language.
Right.
Different, do you know, in the Telugu speaking language in India, which is it's either the second or the first most populated nation in the world. Telugu is the second most prominent spoken language in India. Do you know that those ministers there, they do not have a solid, good, systematic theology in their own language? So, Brother Josh, you got to ask yourselves, what's the problem? What are we doing in the West? I mean, think about the money at our disposal here at the church in the West.
Right.
And think about our church, this little church in Newcastle, Indiana. I mean, if I told you our budget, it would probably make you blush, right? I told you I'm bivocational. And I'm not saying any of this to puff anyone up. I'm just saying we need to, through publishing, through other avenues, rethink the mission field in the 21st century. I personally, in a very humble way, think we make it way too complicated. With Zoom and other technologies, we can make contact with men there, build relationships with men there, and begin to foster and cultivate opportunities to begin to funnel and to put solid theology in the native pastor's hands so that they can then reform their own pulpits. They can reform and begin to preach the true unadulterated gospel. And then the Holy Spirit in combination with his word is going to do the rest of the work. We just have to get those men informed. So PBHB right now, I had a meeting with Pastor Sukumar. He has members of his church who need jobs. They need good paying jobs. $1 here is like $10 there. And so we're going to give them a systematic theology in English. They're going to translate it into Telugu. And now the men there at the Bible Institute are going to have a Reformed Baptistic systematic theology to help them navigate through the major doctrines that all interconnect with one another in the Bible. So that's some of the things that PBHB does that kind of isn't on our website that you don't see.
Right.
Another thing, I'm going to be doing a video and posting it. You want me to go down this rabbit trail?
Sure. Yeah. I was just let me throw in though, brother, because
sure.
I did not expect to talk about this, that part, because I was not aware of that part of your ministry. But yeah, I mean, that just has me thinking toward, like you said, like I can juggle between 20 systematic theologies on my shelf, and there's new ones coming out all the time, and I'm debating the merits of this one over the merits of that one. And sometimes you lose track of, like you said, that in the days of Logos Bible software and Olive Tree app and all these things that we have available to us, the missional impetus of publishing these things in languages. You hear about Bibles, right? Like we hear about Bible translations, but like you said, systematic theology is practical helps for pastors to work through doctrine. That's huge. But go ahead, go down your rabbit trail, Doug. This is interesting.
Yeah, just more background kind of stuff to PBHB. In addition to republishing the 17th century forefathers that we have as Particular Baptists, we also want to help equip, churches here in the States with resources to help massage and reintroduce their congregations to these confessional and catechetical standards, which we believe will strengthen them, it will aid them, and it will insulate them moving forward as the Church of Christ from different doctrinal errors and things of that nature.
Mm.
So we just, this week, there was a pastor who contacted us from Redeeming Grace Church. Our copy editor, AJ, worked more closely with him, but I just saw the finished product. I'm pointing over here because the bindery is actually just outside this door here. We did some custom, oh, here it is. I got one on my desk. It's right here. This paperback, can you see that?
Yeah, fantastic.
Calvary Redeeming Grace Church. And so, it's got a nice just introduction. There's their church logo. It's got a forward here by the pastor. And basically, Ryan Wassel, sorry, Ryan, if I'm pronouncing your last name wrong. But Ryan wanted something to give to his people to help introduce them to the biblical truths that are contained in that Orthodox Catechism. This was written by 17th century Particular Baptist by the name of Hercules Collins, for your viewers. It's basically the Heidelberg Catechism, which is a beautifully devotional catechism adapted by Hercules Collins, especially on the areas of the Abrahamic covenant to convey a Baptistic or a credo-Baptistic perspective. But we're doing stuff like that. We want to be a publishing resource to help. We got the Hercules Collins Catechism already in a format that's edited, that's ready to be printed, and here's a custom cover. It's a pew edition. You could stick it in the pew, relatively inexpensive, and then Pastor Ryan could put a personal forward there. And again, that goes back to what I was saying earlier about this pastor. I don't know him, but he's doing what I was talking about of trying to not let this just be something special to him as a hobby horse, but really trying to show his church and his congregation the importance of our theological heritage. Yeah. So that's just, publishing thing, custom resources for churches. Our primary vision is getting the original works back into print. But the translation work over there, as it's connected to our local church, we have these other things in the background that kind of are going on.
Oh, sure. I did want to ask you, make sure we get to this, Doug, just so I don't forget. But I was going to ask you, what sort of sources are you guys looking for? Like, how are you identifying them? Is there like a time period? Is there, maybe the stature of the individual writing them? But before I let you answer that, I was going to just point out, you were mentioning earlier the need of going back to the original sources, and that's just such a refreshing thing to hear, because there's been so many times, and I know you've experienced this too, where you're doing, like, let's say you're doing research for some project, and you're reading widely, and all of a sudden you start recognizing they're all citing the same one or two sources, right? Like everybody's just kind of, it's kind of an echo chamber from one or two sources. And I think that for a lot of us today, we're in a church environment which feels disconnected from the church of the past. Like in many ways, evangelical culture has just kind of created this feeling of newness and freshness that's not healthy, insofar as it's disconnected from the historical faith of the Christian church. So there has been a I think profitable and healthy movement toward connection to that historic faith, and a lot of that has to do with, like you said, looking back to what others have said previous to the last 100 years. For many of us, we're used to just looking within the last 2-3 generations.
Yeah.
You're instead pointing toward, let's look back 500 years, like what was going on at the time of the Reformation. What are the early church fathers saying? Those sort of things. But all that to say, Doug, how are you guys looking at sources? What sort of sources are you considering? Who makes the cut, in essence, for you guys to tackle a project?
Yeah. So in regards, I was having a thought here, sorry, about what you just said. A good illustration of what you just said, I saw a tweet not that long ago, and someone said, how has your theology changed in the last 10 years or something like that? And there were some guys, not to slam anyone particular, but there were some guys that were posting like, this was my theology in 2010. It was like Wayne Grudem's systematic theology. And then they had, Calvin's Institutes. This is my theology today. And I think that's just a good illustration of evangelicalism, where it was, and how we are benefiting from the resourcement of original, older resources, right?
Right.
That has really been going on for a while. Banner of Truth has been doing a great job. Reformation Heritage Books come on the scene, not that long ago. They're doing a great job. And we're simply coming alongside these other very profitable ministries, very worthy ministries, and trying to retrieve a particular aspect of the Particular Baptist, stuff. But to answer your question, century-wise, I mean, the 17th century works take a lot more effort because, it's Old English. I'm sorry. your viewers are going to correct me on that. Most of it's Middle English, but
Okay.
the reason I bring that up is just because it's difficult for the foreign typesetters to work through. They have to have that eye that sees that the F is supposed to be an S.
Right.
Those take time. So right now we only have a few that are published by the 17th century, but we do want to place emphasis on that 17th century works. With that said, we're very excited at the G3 conference of September. We're going to have our first volume of the works of Benjamin Keach. It's forecasted to be 14 volumes. It's a critical edition that's being edited by Dr. Matthew Stanton. He's a Canadian pastor. And we have the first volume. It's preset. We actually ordered the cloth material to get it in so we could actually start making it. And then in September, we're going to release it at the G3. So that's a 17th century, work there. So we do want to give emphasis to that. But, we work with an advisory board consisting of other Calvinistic Baptist pastors and scholars. And we're dipping into whatever we think is the most valuable works from the Particular Baptist.
Okay.
Just today, I released one on, it's called The Covenant and Baptism. It's a compilation of some writings by James Haldane. He was a Scottish minister who early on in his ministry practiced paedobaptism, and then later in his ministry, he switched to baptizing only confessing disciples. And Haldane gives a very concise but persuasive reason based upon covenant theology in this little book of why he did that. So he's coming from the 19th century. During the 1800s, we published a book not that long ago by Spurgeon on the Lord's Supper, its significance, its meaning, things like that. So really working with our advisory board and, looking at all of the witness of the Particular Baptist heritage, we're publishing things from all different centuries. One thing I do want to mention this, as the general editor and establishing this, I did not want my own confessional convictions to stifle our heritage as Particular Baptist. And so, we will, in fact, we have already published some things in the Calvinistic Baptist tradition that I personally, as a full subscription to 1689, wouldn't agree with entirely. But I would challenge your listeners, if they find themselves in this vineyard of Christ's kingdom, known as the Reformed, Calvinistic, or Particular Baptist vineyard, I would challenge us all to be willing to be stretched horizontally like a rubber band a little bit in some of the things that really do fall within and under the umbrella of orthodoxy. Like, if I could just, for example, the 1689, it's purposely written to where an individual can hold to, infralapsarianism or supralapsarianism. For your viewers, not trying to use fancy language, just saying, did God decree his elect, but with an understanding or knowledge of their sin, or without a knowledge of their sin? Okay, the 69 is written in a way where you can hold to either position. And it's a sad thing that we wouldn't want to print someone like John Gill or someone like that, because they hold to a particular area of secondary theology that I would happen to disagree with. Okay?
Yep.
So we're wanting not to stifle the witness of the Particular Baptist, let them speak for themselves, and let the readers, kind of wade through that and study through those things. We understand, of course, with our advisory board, the responsibility that comes with publishing works. We want to be careful not to reintroduce new controversies. And so where it's appropriate, we will put footnotes, prefaces, things of that nature. But again, I just want to say that because I found that in the past, there's been people trying to republish the Calvinistic Baptist works, and you're like, why aren't you printing stuff from this guy or this guy? I mean, he was one of the big hitters and scholastics from our tradition. And you kind of just wonder, is it because he held to this one little nuanced view of this or that? And those nuanced views happen to be well within the umbrella of orthodoxy.
Right.
So it's not your particular nuanced view.
Right.
It doesn't mean he shouldn't be printed.
Right.
So yeah, we're picking guys from all centuries, and kind of we want to emphasize the 17th century
Yeah.
the most. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Just kind of giving that broad range, like you said, letting people wade through it. You're always gonna. I mean, good grief, you put 10 theologians in a room, you're gonna have 10, particular takes. Pun intended there, Doug. But 10 particular takes on any number of issues, right? But that's super encouraging. And that's also when you're talking about the typesetting and stuff like that, you mentioned just the challenge of like 17th century. If anybody that's ever dug up one of those, where it's an online PDF and it's just essentially photocopied, right, of one of those original works and stuff, it's almost unintelligible. It's such a blessing for somebody to go through the effort of retypesetting, formatting all of those for a modern consumption. But Doug, where can people keep up with you guys? With you individually? I don't know if you're on social media anywhere that they can keep up with you. Particular Baptist Heritage Books. If you could just mention the website again, and maybe even anything that you guys are currently working on. I know you said you guys just last year celebrated the first hardback that you guys churned out. But what's on the horizon, and where can people keep up with you guys?
Yeah, sure. Personally, just my local church is where you can, keep up with me. I told you what I do for a living: family, fatherhood, a husband, work, church. I'm not on social media.
And
I got
probably
my
sleep a
hand.
lot better.
Yeah, I got my hands on the plow, brother, and I can't. I don't have time to keep track of that stuff. So yeah, look us up. It's Christ Reformed Baptist Church, Newcastle, Indiana. Would love to, if you're ever in the area, come by and visit us some Sunday morning. We would love to see you and worship our triune God, with you. As far as the publishing ministry, you could go to particularbaptistbooks.com, particularbaptistbooks.com, and we do have several brothers who help promote that on social media, on Twitter. Our hashtag is @BaptistBooks, @BaptistBooks. You can find us on Twitter, the Facebook page, and then I think we have an Instagram. So anyways, the other brothers take care of that stuff. But yeah, you can keep up with what we got going there. What we do have coming down the horizon, we are working on our second volume of Abraham Booth's works. We are currently working on John Gill, the third edition. We have a whole host of titles that we're trying to get ready for the G3 conference. I just got done finishing editing J.C. Philpott. He was a former Anglican minister who converted to the Particular Baptist, or that society in England we're called the Strict Baptist Community. He has a really interesting work, solid on the Trinity. It's called the Covenant Offices, the Covenant Office of the Holy Spirit. So I just got done editing that, and I also edited a book that Pastor Brandon Ray, he's from Missouri, did the foreword to. He did his dissertation on Charles Spurgeon's Sabbatarianism. And this book is on the salvation of children by Charles Spurgeon. And I think that the guidance, the discussion, the talk, the relevancy amongst Baptists of talking about the salvation or childhood conversions in our churches is just a topic we ought to always just kind of be marinating in. I hope it will benefit pastors, Spurgeon's perspective on some of those things. I don't know one Baptist pastor who has not had to wrestle with the issue of what age do I baptize? What do we do? And every church is a little bit different in that way, but still being faithful to their credo Baptist, convictions. So we hope that book by Spurgeon will offer great help to Calvinistic Baptist churches.
Absolutely.
There's many other, you could, just follow us on social media. I just was reading last night, going to bed, brother. I actually sent it over to somebody. It was a quote by Abraham Booth. He's got a little work that we just published, and we're going to release it in August. It's called The Death of Legal Hope and the Life of Evangelical Obedience. It's just a wonderful book that helps keep and shows how the Particular Baptists maintained the doctrine of justification in its proper category and lane, and the doctrine of sanctification in its category or lane. And they never conflated it. Some would in our tradition, some did, but Booth just nails it. He just nails it. It's just a nice little book, like 150 pages. And, we as Baptists are going to have a lot of people coming into our churches that kind of need to be readjusted and recalibrated on this a little bit, because dispensationalism has taken its toll in our understanding of the proper role or place of the law, in our life. And so this is just a good little book you can give someone in the church who, hears you speaking about the moral law in a positive way and thinks you're preaching legalism or
Right.
works. And you're like,
Right.
no. Evangelical obedience, a completely different, doctrine here. So we
Yeah.
just published that. It'll be released in August. We talked about Haldane's book, Covenant and Baptism. That was released today online, so your viewers can go get that today if they would like. So that's kind of what we got going on. We talked about the translation work. Pray for us. I would like to plug, if you don't mind, a prayer request for your viewers. So a lot of people don't know this, but most of the major Reformed publishing houses that we're all aware of, they benefit greatly from private donations to help fund their staff. Okay. So a lot of the major general editors of some of these major publishers, they have research assistants, they have editing assistants, and most of that staff is not paid for by the sale of their books. So think about where we're at this point as Calvinistic Baptists. There has only been, over the last 50 years, a resurgency of our confessions and our catechisms. There's been, praise be to God, great reformation taking place. But honestly, to the viewers who may find themselves identifying with Calvinistic Baptist community, we are such a small percentage in the broad, visible evangelical church, right? And if you think it's important for your church, if you think it's important for our seminaries, if you think it's important for the future generations of our churches to preserve and to continue on our distinct theological heritage, please prayerfully consider becoming a partner with us. We have a young man who was a student at Midwestern. He put that on pause in order to become the copy editor. And so his desk, I can't do it with the camera, but his desk is right here. He works right here in the same office with me. His name's AJ Hammerker. And AJ has to eat. AJ has to have a roof over his head, things of that nature. And right now, since 2022, when we published our first book, our model is that every sale of our book, the profits that we would make from that goes right back into keeping that book into print. So the paper we have to buy, the materials we have to buy to keep the book always in print goes right back into that. So we had an original kitty of funds, a treasury of funds, and those funds got it kicked off. It got it started. Making books is a huge undertaking. But the staff, and we just have one person that we need to really keep at his desk, and that's the copy editor. He's the guy that's the grease in the gears. I'm the general editor, right? I'm doing some editing. I've talked about that. But he's the guy every day, 8 hours, like you were just talking about, taking those facsimiles and, doing some transcription work or receiving transcribed work from other people and word for word, making sure it's faithful to the original publication. That brother, that's what we need the help with. So there's different ways you can look on our website to partner with us, whether it's a monthly commitment of $25 or $100. Right now, just be very transparent, we're about $2,000 short each month. We need a $3,000 a month goal. Right now, we have $1,000 a month. Pastor Ken Gleach, he's our donor relations partner. You can contact him through our website. And please just prayerfully consider that. And if people can't financially do it, just put us on your prayer list at church. You're hearing a lot of the heart that's behind what we're trying to do. So if this is important to you and you think it's worthwhile, please lift us up in the Lord in prayer.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Will do. And Pastor Doug, appreciate you again. And just for everybody, that's Particular Baptist Heritage Books. But Pastor Doug, thanks so much for chatting with me today. This has been really fun.
No, it's been my pleasure, Josh. Nice to meet you.
Go.